Well, hello there everyone, it's Nina Marie. Thanks for joining me today for another video. Today I'm going to be sharing two cards that I made with Simon Says Stamps April 2025 card kit, and this one is called Butterfly Blossoms. It is beautiful with the 6x8 stamp set that has coordinating stencils included in the kit so that you can color your stamped images very easily. There are pattern papers and also some Tim Holtz collage papers along with collage medium, some texture paste. So a lot of great stuff that is fantastic for some fun techniques. And I'm going to be sharing a couple of things with you to be able to create some really fun cards. One of them features the collage papers, and I paired it with not only some distress crayons but also some distress oxides to create a really beautiful inky background. This one's a lot of fun. So let's start first by creating with the collage papers so we can create a neat background. I have one of the papers that I've chosen along with some white cardstock, and I'm going to bring in some collage medium. Now, I have the large jar already open in my stash, so I'm going to use that today. However, you are going to get a small bottle of the collage medium to get you started. You want to apply a coating of that collage medium to your paper before you lay your collage paper on top. Once you have your paper layered on top of that wet adhesive, then you're going to go ahead and take more collage medium and apply that over top. That way you are adhering this collage paper to your cardstock. Now you could also apply this collage paper to some of the pattern paper that's in the kit, which I think would also be fun. So I'm just really carefully, without trying to mess up this collage paper because it's very thin like tissue paper, I'm very carefully applying that adhesive. Then I'll let this dry. Once it was dry, I then brought in some distress crayons. The fun thing about collage paper and collage medium is that you can put anything you want over top of it. So I'm going to start first with the crayons, and I scribbled a bit of this orange color onto the paper, and then using my finger I'm going to blend it out. Then I'll bring in some yellow, and this pretty mustard color worked beautifully with the orange to create a nice little glow. I'm going to add some green as well. Just wanting to create some earthy colors that match nicely with the colors of the kit. I'm using my finger to blend each of these into the next, just so that way I get a softer transition. Distress crayons blend really easily on top of a surface like the collage medium because it has a little bit of a slightly slicker surface for the medium to be able to blend easily on. And you can come in with as many layers of the crayons as you want. So I'm going to allow some of these colors to overlap a little bit and create new colors in between, which is always a lot of fun. Once I have the crayons applied to the bottom half of my project, then I'm going to bring in some distress oxides. The oxides are going to create a really beautiful, soft watercolor effect. I applied the oxide ink onto a piece of plastic, this is a stamp pocket, and I sprayed it with a little bit of water before I brought it over to my surface before I start pressing this onto my paper. This is going to create a beautiful effect with that distress crayon. The distress crayon is reactive, so as you can see, we're getting some really cool water spots with the ink, and I love how this is layering up with the green and creating a little bit more of a lime green in between, which is beautiful. I did want to add a little bit of distressing to it, however, so I brought in a brown, and I'm going to do the same thing, adding just a little bit of that color here and there to create a bit more contrast. I really like using the pocket to be able to do my ink smushing. You could ink smush directly onto your work surface, but I find the pocket is really helpful in helping me maintain a little bit of control as I place my ink. I will use my heat tool to dry this layer as well. Once it was dry, then I brought in some distress spray stain. This is the gold color. I think it's tarnished brass if I remember correctly. And this is a beautiful gold color that will add a bit of shine to the background once it's dry. I'm going to die cut this panel now that we've created with the Simon Says Stamp Nested Domed Arches die set. This is going to allow me to create a window, and I'm going to pop this up onto my card base. The reason I want to pop this up is because the remaining piece that I had cut out of the paper is actually going to get used on my card as well, but that's going to get recessed into this negative space. So it's going to give me a little bit of depth here. I'm going to cut this panel down, however, just so that way I end up with a little bit of a white border separating the outer area from the inner part. So now I can nest this into my card, and I will glue this directly to the card base, so that way the outer area is dimensional and then this one is recessed in, which looks really, really neat. And if you can hear my cat Oscar meowing throughout this video, I apologize. He was being very needy this evening as I'm working on voicing this over. So now I'm going to bring in a frame. This is also part of the Simon Says Stamp die collection. This is the nested domed arch frames, and this will look beautiful framing up the outer area of my panel. So I'm going to cut this from some metallic cardstock. This is Simon Says Stamp matte gold, and I'm going to use this to give me a little bit of a metallic finish here. I wanted to bring in a little bit more of that gold to go with that tarnished brass that we splattered on the background. I'm going to glue this with Simon Says Stamp Craft Tacky Glue, but I'm going to hold this with my tweezers just to help me make sure I will get this placed correctly, just to aid me in the placement of this piece. It's very delicate, so I want to make sure I don't bend it, and I love how that adds a little bit of framing to the window. I want to stamp some of the flowers from the stamp set using some embossing ink onto vellum. This is going to be very soft and elegant. I did prep the surface of my vellum with a powder tool prior to stamping just to make sure that the powder only sticks to the stamped areas. And I am going to stamp this twice because I'm not pressing too hard with my MISTI tool because I want to make sure I don't over stamp this image. Then I can take my gold embossing powder and tap off any excess. That's going to allow me to heat set this. Anytime I emboss vellum, I always let my heat tool get really good and hot before bringing it to the vellum so that I can minimize any bit of warping that might happen to the paper. That's giving me this beautiful image that I can go ahead and cut out. So I'm going to go ahead and glue the bottom part of this image with some craft tacky glue, just so that way it's flush to the card. But then the rest of the image, I'm going to add some foam tape behind. I'm going to hide that foam tape though on the areas that are the most opaque. So the areas where there is very little of the vellum showing. That way my adhesive will be hidden and you won't even notice it. This is a great trick for being able to hide your adhesive but still get some dimension with your project. So this is where I'm adding the foam squares in any of those areas where there's a bit more of a heavier amount of embossing powder. My sentiment is going to get stamped onto some black cardstock. I need something with a bit of contrast here, and so I'm going to go ahead and ink that up with some embossing ink and then stamp that down. I'm going to use white embossing powder for the heat embossing, and then I am going to cut this out. There are coordinating dies for the Butterfly Blossoms stamp set, and they are a purchase that is separate from the card kit. However, if you are a card kit subscriber and you add the dies to your kit purchase prior to its shipping, they will all ship together, so that way you don't have to pay for extra shipping. It's always a nice feature that Simon offers. Now to embellish my card, I am going to use some Dazzling Gems. These are the gold color, and again, just bringing in more of that metallic tone so that way it really ties all of this together. That warm tone also goes really nice with the colors of ink that we have on our background. And there we go. We have this very beautiful card made possible with that fun collage paper and also some inks and crayons. I really love the effect that this provided. Such a fun way to be able to create a really unique background. Now, if you love pattern paper, I think you're going to really enjoy the next card that I'm going to share. So the pattern papers in this kit are absolutely stunning. They're from Paper Rose, and I'm going to die cut one of them from this Memory Box die set. This is the Fringed Scalloped dies, and I love this set so much. I'm going to cut the left side of this pattern paper with that die, and so that gives me this really pretty scallop edge around this piece, which will look beautiful on my A2 card. I'm going to stamp the Butterfly Blossoms stamp set, one of the images here, onto some white cardstock with VersaFine clear ink from Simon Says Stamp, the Nocturne color, and this is going to allow me to heat emboss these images. Because this is a pigment ink, it will stay wet a little bit longer, and that will allow me to sprinkle the clear embossing powder over top to get that embossed finish. I am stamping this image twice, so I rotated my paper to be able to get two images across the cardstock. Then I use the clear embossing powder to sprinkle over top, and then with my heat tool, I will go ahead and heat set this. For an image like this, I typically will heat the back side of the paper a little bit first, and then come to the front. That will allow me to kind of minimize my warping a bit, because if I heat the back side of the paper, it will want to warp one way, but then when I come to the front, it'll warp back the other way. So then it ends up being pretty flat. I'm going to bring in my Simon Says Stamp Craft Tacky Mat at this point and work on stenciling. The stencils in the kit are super handy because they have an alphanumeric labeling system on them, so that way you can easily tell which stencil piece goes with which stamp. So for instance, I'm going to zoom in here so you can see this better. The floral image that I'm working with is F1. So F1 is the stamp that I've chosen, and then I'm going to match that up. So now I know exactly which part of the stencil is the area that I need to color in my stamped images. Really handy and easy. I'm going to line this up, and my craft tacky mat will hold that in place, but I did tape off a little bit onto the one side just to make sure I don't get any ink off the edge of the stencil and into the area where I'm going to color for the next flower. I'm using 2 different shades of Simon Says Stamp Positively Saturated ink to color in the base coloring of the flowers. I used butter for that layer, and then I'm going to bring in a very small blending brush from Waffle Flower to help me add a little bit of shading using honey ink, and this is going to allow me to feather in some color to shade part of this flower. You could color the flower with just one flat color of ink, but if you wanted to add some shading, using very detailed blending brushes will help you do that. And it's pretty easy to come through here and just add a little bit of color here and there. I'm not trying to make this fancy, and I'm not trying to use a particular light source. I'm just wanting to add a little bit of shading in a slightly different color. So now I'm going to bring in Sherbet, and Sherbet is a really nice orange color, and it's going to allow me to color in the centers of the flowers. Again, I'm going to use a detail blending brush to help me do that, so I only get the orange color in the very center portion of the 3 largest flowers. Now I can work on coloring the leaves, and these I'm going to color with Field and Sprout. Again, I'm using small brushes to do this. I want to add a base coat of Sprout. These are very small leaves, so there's not a ton to color here, and you could simply color them with one layer if you wanted to. However, I did want to add that shading, so I'm going to bring in that really detailed blending brush again, and then just use Field to add a little bit of color at the base areas of the petals, so kind of where they're meeting up with the stems of the flowers. And then that's going to do it. Pretty simple coloring. These come together so fast, and it makes the coloring of these flowers super easy. So if you are someone who doesn't care to color with markers, pencils, or watercolors, and you prefer your inks, this stamp and stencil set is fantastic. Now I'm going to bring in 2 different styles of foam squares. I have thin and 3D. I'm going to use the thin ones first and apply those to the back side of one of my floral elements that I've cut out. So this is going to allow me to layer up this flower onto my project, but then I can add the next flower on top using the 3D foam square. So this will add 2 different heights of dimension to my project and allow me to get some depth here. So it doesn't look like the flowers are at the same level across my piece, which is just a really great way to add some more realism to the project. This looks super cute with the butterflies coming out from behind. I'm going to pop this up onto an A2 card. So I'm putting some large strips of foam tape on the back side, and then I'm going to layer this onto a top folding Simon Says Stamp white card base. This is made from 120-pound white cardstock, so it's super stable and sturdy. So I have a lot of things on this card, and it's going to hold up really nicely. For my sentiment, I'm going to emboss this as well. I'm using brown cardstock though. This is Simon Says Stamp Dark Chocolate, and I'm using the clear embossing ink to stamp this. I will use white embossing powder for the greeting, and then that will allow me to get a really cute little sentiment that I can pop up onto the top left corner of my card. So then after heat setting this, I went ahead and cut the sentiment out, and then I will use actually some black foam squares on the back side of this to pop the sentiment up off of my project. The black foam squares allow the adhesive to hide a little bit better. White would stand out a bit more if you saw this card from the side. The black just kind of blends in a little bit more. Now for a little bit of embellishment, I did use some Nuvo drops. This is a really pretty iridescent white color, and I was trying to go for like a dewy, magical droplet effect, which I think looks really neat, and it turned out beautiful for an embellishment on this project. So I'm really happy with those drops as the final touch to this card. And there is a Simon Says Stamp grocery bag A2 envelope included in the kit, which would look gorgeous with either one of these 2 cards that I created today. There's also some fun washi tapes, which I thought were really pretty colors that match nicely with the kit contents too. So that's a great way to be able to send this card off to somebody, is to put it in that cute little grocery bag envelope and seal up the front with the washi tape. I hope you were inspired by the cards that I shared today. These were a lot of fun to create. I really enjoyed doing the collage paper with the distress crayons and the distress oxide inks. It would be a lot of fun if you put that collage paper on the pattern paper. If I get a chance to create another card with this kit, that is definitely what I'm going to do next, because I really, really love those pattern papers, and the collage papers matched really nicely with the style. Collage paper is one of those products that you can just literally have fun experimenting with. So I hope when you get your card kit, you will try them out and have some fun playing with them. I hope you were inspired by the projects that I shared today. I appreciate that you stopped by and spent some time with me. I will be back very soon with more to share, but until I see you again, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and thanks again for stopping by.